Good evening, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider. Thanks for being with me tonight. I'm obviously not in our studio or at my house. I'm in a hotel room in Arizona. I flew into Phoenix, and I guess I'm actually in Scottsdale, and it is so beautiful. It's like 86 degrees. This morning I woke up and I went for a run outside, and I've spent the day seeing places that I have not seen in association with this trial. For instance, I have never been to the home where Charles was shot, or JJ's school, or the Burger King, or the Walgreens where Lori stopped. And I'm going to put together a little video for those of you who haven't been here, just to kind of lay out the timeline to help you visually see where these stops were. And anyway, we'll have that tomorrow for you on Courtroom Insider, because the reason why I'm actually in Arizona is because tomorrow morning, Lori Vallow has a court hearing bright and early at 8:30 in downtown Phoenix, and this is where a few motions are going to be discussed, including media and cameras. Lori does not want court TV in the courtroom running the cameras for this trial. We'll see what the judge says about that. From what I understand, an attorney from Court TV will be there. There's a couple of other motions that are on, or a couple of other items that are on the agenda. I just cannot believe this trial starts 3 weeks from today. 3 weeks from right now, we'll be doing another Courtroom Insider about the first day of jury selection. I guess I should say jury selection starts 3 weeks from today, and we will see how long it takes to seat a jury here in Maricopa County. How many people know about the case, the trial, how many people have even heard Lori Vallow Daybell's name. So, couple busy weeks here coming up in the next few weeks. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Tonight, we're going to talk mainly about Dateline and the Lori Vallow Daybell interview with Keith that happened Friday night. I know many of you saw it. I know many of you in other countries haven't been able to see it, and you have questions about where to see it, how to see it, all that. I know many of you were disappointed with it. I know many of you were fascinated by it. Some of you wanted to see more. Many of you wanted to see more Lori. Many of you said that you didn't want to because you didn't want to give her the airtime. So opinions kind of all over the board. Love to know what you think, because here in a couple of minutes, I want to take your questions about it, about what I know, or try to answer what I know, and then also your thoughts just in general. So feel free to comment below wherever you're watching from, whether on Facebook or YouTube or well, those are the only two places we're at, so feel free to leave your comments. But if you watched it, what'd you think? What were your overall impressions with it? I do know a couple of things before I kind of jump in and analyze or share my thoughts about it. This interview came together, well, it's been in the works for some time, and Lori has wanted to talk since before her sentencing in Idaho. But the jail in Idaho did not allow cameras in, and so she didn't get to talk. Why was she so insistent at that time? I don't know. Some have thought that maybe she wanted to fall on the sword for Chad, that she wanted to, save him before his trial. Regardless, it didn't happen. And then she got moved to the Idaho prison. And that is where, I mentioned this the other night, her and I started to communicate, started to email back and forth, and she really wanted me to go see her in person. Those conversations between me and her so far have been off the record, but I will say there hasn't been anything that's like knocked my socks off, like, whoa, I really want to report that. But there has been some interesting little things here and there with her. Then she got moved to Arizona. And in Arizona, the Dateline team made another crack at maybe interviewing her, and the jail said yes. And from what I've been told, they haven't allowed a jailhouse interview in like 6 years there. It's a new sheriff. Jodi Arias was in this same facility. Remember her? And she was doing interviews a lot. And she has some characteristics that many people say are similar to Lori. Personality traits and whatnot. But that trial, from what I remember, and I didn't follow it that closely, was just something else. In fact, it was 2 trials for her. So that's kind of where how the interview came together. Dateline was given 90 minutes. They were allowed to set up their cameras beforehand, and then they went back the next day and recorded. Now, think in your mind for a minute, if you had 90 minutes with Lori Vallow, and that's it, where do you start? How do you build that relationship so that she trusts you and talks? Because if you go into an interview too hot, too heavy, too, persistent, there's a chance she walks out and you don't have what you need. And so I think Keith played it well in the fact that he was trying to build a relationship with her. She obviously was there to spar. She came prepared. And from, what I've been told, the first 60 minutes of that interview was basically her rambling about her life after death, near-death experiences. And Keith was patient with her, and then they had to get to the substance of why they were there. And Lori obviously didn't want to go there. But there were some things. There were some interesting things that came out of it. Some of my notes here. Lori talked about the first time she met Chad, it was like the veil between heaven and earth was open, and that they knew each other as they had known each other from past lives. She talked about, Keith, it was interesting here because Keith brought up the fact about Chad calling her goddess lover. And she pushed back and said, how do you know that? He never called me that. Well, guess what? We have texts. And here's a text. Remember this? From the trial where Chad talks, the Harry Potter text that was so well known, where he talks about goddess lover. Right there. I mean, how do you say it? And also, Keith is there. How do you keep all these facts straight? I've covered this story in and out. If you were to ask me specific dates and times of certain things, I don't know. Today I had to go back and look at my timeline of testimony of the time that the 911 call was made after Charles was shot and the time that Lori went to Burger King and Walgreens. I don't remember all those times. So I know that I had heard the term goddess lover, but was that in a text? Was that in a voicemail? Where was it? Well, it was from this text. So instantly, Lori pushed back and said that that he never called her that. Well, he actually did. We have a text. So that argument doesn't work. She denied the stuff about the Ned Schneider stuff too. And Keith pushed back and said, no, Charles Vallow, for those that are like, what's this Ned Schneider stuff? Charles Vallow had called the police saying that Lori says I'm possessed by someone named Ned Schneider. And it came out in text messages that she was talking with Chad about Ned Schneider, and it later became Hiplos, these evil spirits that had entered his body. And Charles was so concerned that he called the police, which I believe these will all come out here in 3 weeks when this trial starts. We'll see it again. We'll see this information. Lori was flirtatious. She was smiley. She was giddy in a way. She was laughing. She said, "Can I joke with you, Keith? Can we joke here?" If you haven't seen the Keith preview that came out before the trial, actually, I'll show you it here. This was released last week before the show.
Are you keeping track, Keith? Can we agree on that, Keith? Can I joke with you, Keith? Can we joke? Good one, Keith. You've heard a lot of stuff, Keith, and I'm here to say you've heard a lot of stuff, but what I tell you will be the truth. I thought we were going to be friends, Keith. I thought we were going to be friends. Get your facts straight, Keith. Aren't appearances not what they might seem to be, Keith? Could you get your life story out in 90 minutes, Keith? How old are you, Keith? Keith, we can talk all day. I can talk all day. I don't have anything to do. You could extend your time. Come back. Come see me.
There's a lot of Keiths in that promo. And she did. She really wanted to be friends with Keith. She, from what I've been told, Lori was a Dateline fan before all this. She watched Dateline and liked true crime, so she clearly knew who Keith was and clearly knew his deep voice, and inmates probably watch true crime shows, or at least Datelines, when they're in jail and in prison. So she asked, Keith, can I joke with you? And then at one point, with a laugh, she says, if I were to have a bumper sticker, it would say, Jesus loves everyone, but I'm his favorite. Something, or Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite. Okay. Interesting. She talked about Tammy Daybell. She was asked about Tammy Daybell, and she said that Tammy visits her, that they've been friends, that they, have been friends for a while, and that Tammy's okay with this. This is similar to what she said back when she was sentenced. Do you remember that in Fremont County where she said, Tammy is my friend? I don't know. I don't believe that Lori and Tammy ever actually met on this earth, in Lori's terms, physically met. It's possible. I don't know if we've ever seen any sort of evidence that they did. Tammy Daybell did not go to a lot of these conferences that Chad went to. She didn't travel to Arizona with him. That's clearly where the affair started and why Chad would come back to see Lori. She wasn't with him then. Lori did move up to Rexburg eventually, but I don't think that they ever ran into each other. If you know differently, please comment or send me a message so that I can, if you have a photo or something. But no, in fact, Chad was so, open about the fact of his relationship with Lori that they were walking around the track at BYU, Idaho. Melanie Gibb testified about that. So she told Keith that she and Tammy Daybell were friends. She talked about how Lori is all about love. She loves everyone. Everyone is her friend. And this was reminiscent of her statement, really her defense attorney, John Thomas's, his statement at Lori's sentencing that he worked on with Lori, where she said she's all about love and loving and whatnot. Then Keith brought up the rings from Amazon. Remember this? These were the rings that were ordered, the malachite rings ordered on Amazon when Tammy was still alive, after Charles had been shot and killed, and Lori was in Rexburg. We have this Amazon screenshot that shows these rings were ordered and shipped to the home in Arizona, or excuse me, the home in Idaho. And then, voila, months later, Chad and Lori are married on the beach, and what are they wearing? The rings. This was a big moment at the trial, Lori's trial and Chad's trial in Idaho. Keith asked about those rings, and this is what Lori said.
And you bought the wedding rings.
That is
before.
an untrue statement. You don't know what you're talking about on that one.
It's online. The purchase is there. And then we see the video of those very rings on your fingers and that ceremony on the beach.
Those rings were not initially bought for us. So get your facts straight, Keith, before you start making accusations. See, you don't know.
Who were they bought for?
You don't have any idea because you've heard all these rumors.
You're going to tell me who they were bought for.
Rumor has it.
Who were they bought for, if not you?
Alex and Zulema initially.
So is that true? Doesn't matter if Alex and Zulema had the rings too. They were married after Chad and Lori were married. So she says they were originally bought for Alex and Zulema, and then they end up on Chad and Lori's hand. Anyway, it's hard to even try to counter her argument because it just doesn't make much sense. So she talked about the rings. She talked about how she knows the truth and her version of the truth is the truth, and tried to get Keith to listen to her and understand her truth. She talked a lot about Tylee, that Tylee was sassy and smart. There was not any talk of, I guess, compassion for Tylee. I don't know. It was. I kept waiting for her to say something kind about Tylee. She may have said that she loved Tylee, but and of course she has said in the past that Tylee and JJ visit her every day at jail. So she talked about how she almost died when she was delivering Tylee, or I think she did die when she was delivering Tylee, but she and Tylee came back to Earth, which family members have told me they have never heard that story before. But now Lori is saying it on national television. So there was that talk about Tylee. Then there was another part where I have to say, this may have been my favorite part of the interview, just because of how Keith handled it. And I actually kind of I chuckled a little bit, and I know many people also laughed too. Here's the exchange.
You want to go on later and say, Lori told me this in your ominous voice, but really this is what happened. Are you going to do that to me, Keith?
Ominous voice?
Yeah.
Maybe that one.
Yes. That's the exact voice that I'm talking about.
I really can't tell you how many people I've told of how jealous I am of Keith Morrison's voice. I don't even come close. I went to a vocal coach once when I lived in Virginia on TV because my voice I was told by some consultant it was too high and nasally, and so I went to some coach and I said, "Give me a Keith Morrison voice." I don't have it. I'm sorry. And then the piece of video, the another compelling part where Keith kind of got into it was, and you can go watch this at the Today Show. Even if the Today Show showed this Friday morning, this part where Keith said, "Were you there when your children died?" And Lori tried to dodge and say, "Well, was I where?" And he said, "It doesn't matter. Were you there when they died? Were you in the room?" And Lori said, no, she wasn't, but there was some encounter. If you go to the Today Show YouTube channel, you can watch it. And I believe if you're anywhere in the world, you can watch that part there. And then it ended with them talking about Lori's dancing. Lori's a dancer, and she definitely danced around the questions, the answers. And here's how the interview ended.
And you're very good at dancing.
And we should do a little jig.
You've already done a mental jig with your stories.
After I get exonerated, maybe I'll go on Dancing with the Stars and you can come.
Sure, okay, fine.
Okay.
So that was it. Now, the kind of a recap. There were so many other people on this episode too. We heard from Colby, who I thought Colby did a great job talking about how he's basically just come to terms with all of this. He's accepted it, that this is the reality that he's in, that he did say he has felt guilt for being the only member of his family still living. We heard from Ray Hermosillo. He talked about the investigation. We heard from Sheriff Ball, who at the time was with Rexburg PD. We heard from Doug Hart, who was with the FBI. Let's see who else. Oh, Rob Wood. Rob Wood was on there. Prosecutor Rob Wood said a couple of things. So yeah, it was all in all, it was a full Dateline, which I want to get into to talk now. I guess that segues into our next segment about how many of you were hoping the whole thing would be just Lori. But before I do that, I want to say something because it was brought to my attention, and I don't know if I've ever said this before. You know that picture, this picture right here of JJ in red pajamas with that cup the last day he was alive? Those were not the PJs that he died in. Just to be clear, he was buried in another set of PJs. And why does that matter? Well, it's interesting to me that they would take this picture, I think it was around 10 or 11 in the morning. Melanie Gibb and David Warwick testified that they saw him, but then later they actually took the time to change him into different PJs and probably put him to sleep. So it was made during the trial that it was brought up during the trial that he was found buried in red PJs. And I know a lot of those investigators that were at the house will never forget that specific pair of red PJs. That's not the one in the photo. All right. So I know that many of you were disappointed with Dateline, with the show, with the interview. You wanted more of Lori. And let me just explain how a couple things, just from my own head, not that I've I am a consultant with Dateline, in full disclosure, for this story. I've worked with them continually since the beginning. And so they call on me for, information, and I provide them information and talk with them. But it's not like, I'm in the room when they're editing or writing this. They did ask me what questions I would ask Lori if I could go in and talk to her. And Keith is very involved in that sort of things. We'll text or he'll call, especially during the verdict phase of Lori Vallow's trial. He was very involved, wanting to know when the verdict would come down. But Dateline is a program that you have to think, a lot of times viewers tune in and this is the first time they've heard the story. Many of you watching this You know every detail of the story. You followed it from day one. You watched every night. Thank you so much for watching every night here on the Courtroom Insider. So thank you. Thank you very much for that. The other thing is that, so if you got to produce a show so that you can't just have someone tune in and be like, what are they even talking about? Zombies and, Ned Schneider and whatnot. So you got to produce it so that the average person understands. And this is the type of story, you can't do that in 2 minutes. You can't do it in 5 minutes. You really need so much time to delve in and explain the background accurately and to give context and perspective. So Dateline needed to do that to help provide context to Lori's answers. Also, you're dealing with a person who did not want to answer the questions. So do you give them more airtime? Do you just let that person go on and on and on? The first 60 minutes, all she wanted to talk about was Tylee and near-death experiences and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, and not really answer the questions. So it's this juggling act of how do you put in enough Lori but still give it context. So for those of you waiting for the entire interview, I can understand that you might be, upset that they didn't air the whole thing. Many of you also messaged me and said, this is the first time I've heard about the story. What in the world is this? And Lori probably would have loved to have the whole hour and a half. That clip I played you a minute ago where she mimicked Keith and she said, you're going to go back and cut it and say, well, actually, because you have to fact check. You have to make sure you can't just put stuff out there in that format. You also have to work around commercial breaks and, all of that. Now, this is a different format. This is me talking with you, unedited. This is more of a talk show, podcast type format that you could say. If I had the chance to interview Lori, and yes, I've asked, and yes, I hope one day it'll happen, I would post the entire thing for you here. But I'm not Dateline. I don't have to worry about editing it and giving it I want to give you context and perspective, but I would also show you the whole thing here. So I hope that makes sense. I realize that many of you, so many of you are like, where's the interview? We only saw 10 minutes of it, of the 90 minutes, excuse me. Well, there's a reason for that. So I hope that explains it, and hopefully that answers your questions, which I'm gonna transition over into your questions and thoughts, because I have so many that have come in here today. Okay. Are you ready? Here we go. Thank you, by the way. If you still have thoughts and comments, please put them in the things below. Hi, Nate. Is Lori getting paid for representing herself? How do the fees work exactly? Is she saving the state money? Well, I guess you could say, in a way, she's saving the money. She's not going to get paid for being her own attorney. She does have advisory counsel, so she has 2 attorneys that are helping and also an investigator who are helping with the case, and they will obviously get paid. And in a way, I guess you could say she's saving the state a lot of money, because this trial is happening in 3 weeks. I can guarantee that if she had other attorneys assisting her, this trial would not happen for several more months, because there's so much more information and data that you have to go through. Also, they would probably call more witnesses, which is an expense because you have to pay for their travel and their meals and whatnot. Lori is not doing that for now. So, well, at least that we know of. So that's kind of, I guess, in a way, she's saving herself. She's not getting paid. The fees, I'm not sure. Well, normally how they work is that there's an hourly rate for like the attorneys, at least in Idaho, and I would imagine here they have an hourly rate. So, for instance, in Lori's trial, Jim Archibald had an hourly rate. So did John Thomas. They're public defenders. At the end of the trial, they send in the bill, and that's what the county pays them. It's different with Rob Wood and prosecutors because that's their job. They're on a salary. So no matter what their hourly rate is, it doesn't really matter. It's all part of it. Jill asks, I imagine there won't be too much to Lori's defense. Can the judge demand that she have appointed counsel if she becomes unraveled? Good question, Jill. The judge has told her, well, yeah, the judge has told her that if she decides she wants her attorneys to take over the case, she will be granted them, but she can't then switch back to representing herself. So, and wherever they're at in the trial, it keeps going. They don't start over. So if a week into the trial, she says, wait, I want my attorneys back on to help me, they're on. Now, I don't know if what you mean by, quote, unraveled. I don't know if the judge can just suddenly say, all right, I've had enough. You get attorneys now. I think that might violate her rights. But that's what I believe to be there. Okay, Erica asks, not my Erica, my wife. At least I don't think so. Honey, if you have a question, call me. How is Lori wearing makeup? How did she access it? Well, when you're in jail, you have some interesting ways on how to do your hair and your makeup. Dateline did not pay for the hair and the makeup, from what I've been told. They did not provide that. Remember when Lori showed up the first day in Arizona, in Idaho? She had the lipstick on. I'm told you can make that with Jolly Ranchers, with colored pencil. You can get it wet. You can put it on your eyes, put it on your lips, your cheeks. You can take wet paper towels or shirts, fabric, curl them apparently into your hair. As you can see, I do that a lot with my hair. So I don't know the specifics as far as how she got access to that. But, you know, for doing it herself, here she is, and how she looked on the interview. She definitely did have hair and makeup, but Dateline tells me they did not do that themselves. All right, next question from Lori Ann. Will Lori take the stand in her own trial? Can she? She can take the stand. The judge has told her that if she does, she needs to have prepared questions beforehand that one of her advisory attorneys will ask her. It's not like she can just go up and say stuff. She has to actually be questioned. And remember, if she does that, it opens the door for the prosecutors to cross-examine her. So if she decides to testify, that is what will have to happen. Beverly, Nate, I'd love to interview you. Well, thank you, Beverly. How has your journalism career colored your view on life? Oh, that's a big question. You know, Beverly, I guess it's changed me. I can't believe I've been doing this almost 20 years, and I have met people from all walks of life, and hopefully this job has made me a little bit more understanding, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more open-minded and non-judgmental to all points of view, or at least most points of view. I mean, there's obviously things that I still cover that I don't agree with at all, but I still cover them. But yeah, it's changed everything, and hopefully I'm still curious. And we went to lunch with some friends the other day, and well, yeah, I call them friends, my wife and I. Another couple asked, and if you're watching, thank you, they invited us to go to lunch. We kind of know this couple through work, not really close, but they asked us to go to lunch, and so we could kind of get to know each other a little better. So we went and we had a great lunch, but we got there and we sat down and I immediately just started asking questions all about their business. And Eric is like, okay, he's in reporter mode. And they're like, well, wait, we want to ask questions about you. So I think it colors every aspect of my life where I'm able to just hopefully, sit down and talk with anybody and learn something from everybody. Stephanie asks, had I not gone into journalism, which career would I have chosen? Oh man, I don't know. I've always wanted to do this since I was 12. I mean, before that, I wanted to be a cop or a fireman or an attorney or a doctor. But I can't imagine doing anything else right now. Maybe if I were to leave this, go do like PR or something. But that honestly doesn't sound very exciting to me. Yeah, I guess it all depends. But yeah, this is what I've wanted to do. Kathy says, why on earth didn't Lori get the death penalty? Well, she qualified for the death penalty, but what happened, and the prosecutor sought it, but what happened is that in order to have a death penalty case, you have to prepare a mitigation. The defense does. So there's a mitigation expert who is hired, who is brought onto the team, who goes out and interviews all of Lori's families and all of Lori's friends, and they try to come up with the best case as to why her life should be spared. And then the defense uses that if the person is found guilty in the mitigation phase of the trial, where they will go on and call their fourth grade teacher and say, she was the best person and we loved her and this and that and this. Lori would not waive her right to a speedy trial. And because of that, the mitigation specialist said, I don't have enough time to complete this case, to complete all the mitigation. And then the prosecutors filed some late filings, which the defense argued because of these late filings, it's going to affect the mitigation, in so many words. And ultimately, the judge said, all right, the two options are, one, we drop death penalty, or two, the trial gets pushed off. Lori did not want the trial pushed off, so death penalty was taken off the table. It was a win for the defense. It truly was. To get death penalty off the table and have their clients preserved, it was. Now, Chad Daybell was sentenced to death. The big question is would Lori have been? And I think that jury probably would have sentenced her to death. It would have been interesting, as the mother of those children who were tortured and were found the way they were. Now, if it would have been fascinating if Lori had not received death and Chad did, but regardless, that's why she didn't receive death. Here in Arizona, it's not a capital case. It's not an actual first-degree murder case. So that's why she's not eligible for death here. If found guilty here, she will face up to life in prison, but it doesn't matter because they're shipping her back to Idaho. She's still Idaho's inmate on loan to Arizona. She'll go back there where it's nice and cold in the prison and outside. Mandy, do you plan on interviewing Melanie Gibb again? How about Lori's niece, Melanie? Can you tell us if they still subscribe to Lori's ways of thinking? Well, I can tell you that they both do not currently, right now, subscribe to her way of thinking. I have had conversations with both. They have been off the record. I would love to interview them again when the time's right. And yeah, so I have talked with them, but we haven't done any sort of formal interview. And, when the invitation's always open for them to talk. Vonda, do you know what the highest rated Dateline was? Is it the interview with Keith and Lori? I don't know what the highest rated Dateline was. I doubt it was this one, simply because TV habits have changed so much. 10, 20 years ago, when you only could watch on TV, the numbers were ginormous, huge. So during the OJ trial, those were probably massive numbers. And during the To Catch a Predator days with Chris Hansen, they had huge numbers. That was on like every night of the week. But I would imagine this one did rate well. I don't know what the ratings are. I went to look this morning and they hadn't come in yet. But yeah. Pamela, how do you take care of yourself during the trial? What about your other staff that helps you? Do you discuss things or sometimes laugh with each other? We never laugh, Pamela. What are you thinking about? We never discuss things or laugh. Just kidding. That's a joke. We're a fun place to work, in my opinion. I hope so. We all get along. They don't necessarily follow all the ins and outs of the trial, although I was surprised during the previous two trials they did, my other reporters, but they're doing the news. And how do I take care of myself? Well, it's hard. It's so mentally hard and physically hard. I mean, it is a I say this complaining when the attorneys go through so much more. It's tough. I just realized during the past two trials, I have to be sure I exercise in the morning. I have to exercise and I have to eat somewhat healthy. And by that, I mean, I really have cut down on my soda consumption and my candy consumption. And I have a meat stick for my morning snack. Like, I plan out what I'm going to eat. Otherwise, I'll just be dead. So, yeah. This trial shouldn't be such a slog. It is hard being away from my family. And it's hard to just communicate on FaceTime. All of you dads or moms who travel for your jobs, I admire you a lot, because I'm home most nights, but sometimes I do travel. But yeah, my hat's off to you. Emily says, am I going to CrimeCon? Do you know who will present on stage yet? I am going to CrimeCon. It's in September in Denver. They haven't announced the speakers. I've heard of some, and I hope you can go if you can make it. Actually, if you go and register and use Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, you can get a 10% off a standard badge. So it would be great to see you. How is Lori able to color her hair? Linda asks. We talked about that earlier. As far as the coloring, I have no idea. I was going to say maybe they have hair coloring in commissary. I don't think they do, but that'd be interesting if they did. Has Chad been contacted for an interview? Doreen says, do you communicate with him? I have not communicated with Chad. Well, I have attempted, and I have not received any response. And I know that people have asked for interviews with Chad, and as far as I know, he said no to all of them. Jolene says, Lori should be given zero attention, yet here we are. Do you feel like enough is enough? That's a good point, Jolene. Maybe, but maybe not. We haven't heard her speak. I'm a journalist. It's our job to ask questions, and she hasn't had a chance to speak. And imagine if Keith had gone in this interview and she had confessed or actually given information. Then would it be newsworthy? Absolutely. Now, putting her on every day would be irresponsible. She originally wanted to do the interview live months ago. Dateline said, no way. I would never have a Lori Vallow interview live, a live stream. I would go and pre-record it. There are some... Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here. There are... You have to be journalistically responsible in these cases, and carrying Lori Daybell live is not there. So enough could be enough. This is a story that keeps having new developments. And believe me, man, we got an email last week that was like, stop it with the Daybell case. Although he wrote Daynell. And we said, who's Daynell? I'm going to quit going to your website. So I don't know. Claire, has Lori been excommunicated by the LDS Church? Has Chad? Chad has. I've seen the letter of him getting excommunicated. I don't know about Lori. I haven't seen the letter, and so I can't comment on that. The church does not specifically comment about individuals, so I don't know. Monica says, I watched the interview. Is Keith under Lori's spell? I'm disappointed. No, I don't think Keith's under her spell. I know he's not under her spell. I've spoken with Keith several times since the interview. He was frustrated with her. He was probably a little frustrated with himself. That's at least I would be, because you never know going into those things, and all it takes is you kind of get into the groove of an interview, and if you feel like you never hit that groove, and you're up against the clock, you've got 90 minutes with her. Had she said more, they would have put more substance, but she just didn't. But no, he's not under her spell. I think that's his way of trying to gain rapport. Keith is the nicest guy you'll ever meet. There is no ego about him. None. He could have an ego the size of his voice, and he doesn't. And same, the producers are great. Shane produced this with Brittany. She's in Arizona. She helped secure the interviews. They are great. I mean, they've lived and breathed this, and they're not under her spell either. Annie Ann, is that really your name, Annie Ann? Can Dateline exposure threaten to harm Lori's right to a fair trial? Can the judge in Arizona change the stance of her representing herself? I don't believe he can, and the exposure was brought upon herself. A defense attorney would have said, no way you're doing an interview 3 weeks before trial on national television. But she's her own defense attorney, and that's what she said. So I don't think it's going to change anything. Eileen says, do they have beauty shops in prison? No, but funny story, the day that Lori Vallow Daybell was brought back to Rexburg, it was like 5 years ago this week, she appeared in court, and I mentioned the lipstick earlier, and her hair was done. There was a Paul Mitchell Beauty School car parked outside the courthouse that was not associated to the case at all. It just happened to be parked there. And so many people that day were like, they brought in hair and makeup for her from the beauty school. They didn't. Beauty shops. Nancy says, will Lori get to watch herself on Dateline along with others on death row? She's not on death row. And she technically in Arizona is innocent of any crimes. And yes, I believe she watched it. I don't know the specifics, but I'm sure she did, or her legal team could have recorded it and shown it to her. Annette says, I feel like many need their story told, and Lori's getting too much limelight. Do you feel like you and others are making her into a celebrity? Good question. So I think what you mean is there's so many other stories out there. I guess I could see how you might see it that way, turning her into a celebrity, but I don't think that's the case. I think this is a way to show you who she is. And She hasn't done an interview before. Again, if we put her on every night, every week, every 3 weeks, if she was constantly asking for publicity and didn't have anything to add, yeah, then we would be over the line. But this is the first time she's ever done an interview. Of course, it's newsworthy. It is newsworthy. She did talk to Colby on the phone, but we didn't get to see her. Many of you asked if she had a stroke or Bell's palsy because the one side of her face was drooping a little bit. Again, that would be an interesting development. None of that's confirmed. As far as I know, that has not happened, but and that may just be the fact that she's aging a little bit, but I don't know. So I could see how you could be a celebrity. That's the battle that we face in the media every day. She was on the cover of People magazine and then the next week it was Jennifer Lopez or Oprah or somebody. Should she be in the ranks with them? Of course not, but it's news. That's the way I look at it. Jason says in the Dateline interview, Lori talks like she has followers and has to keep up appearances, and since that doesn't get brought up much, where are all the other people who followed Chad and believed in the end of days 144,000 chosen? I don't think there were a lot, Jason. There were some. Melanie Gibb, Zulema, Alex Cox, we know where he is. Audrey Baratario, we know she testified. They're not there. Are there still people out there that believe in this and still follow him? Perhaps. Maybe. Probably more than we know. I would have been surprised that there was this many. But we don't hear much of it. If you're still following it, you may want to examine your life. Jen says, first, thank you, Nate, for the exceptional coverage. Thank you, Jen. After watching Dateline, I'm grappling with a question that I hope you can help me with. Given your direct communication with Lori, do you think she's mentally ill? Mental illness is very serious and yet does not excuse nor justify murder. Lori seems far too calculated and manipulative when it serves her. Thoughts? Well, Jen, I do think, I'm not an expert, I'll say that. I'm not an expert in mental illness. I think after watching the show, Dateline, you would see that she's not 100% there. Now, I don't know the levels of culpability. She knew enough to kill the kids or know of their deaths and then to take their money and flee to Hawaii. So if someone with deep-rooted mental illness, are they going to be able to do that? I don't know. I truly don't. I do believe there is some mental illness there, without a doubt. And I believe that we've heard, or I don't know if it's been public or whatnot, that 6 or 7 psychiatrists evaluated her in Idaho, and she went into the mental facility for 9 or 10 months. So there was clearly something there, and it's religious delusionosity, where you have these delusions, and it makes you wonder if she were to wake up tomorrow and all of the delusions were gone, how would she view her life? And would she wish to be back in that delusion? Excuse me, I had a Coke right before this broadcast. Would she want to go back to the delusions? Probably. She seems pretty happy. She truly seems happy. In her communication with me, it is bizarre how happy she is and uplifting. It would be like you would think I was communicating with my mom. I mean, and even my mom's not that happy. Sorry, Mom, but my mom gets on my case. So, I hope that answers your questions, Jen. Ashley, can someone ask Zulema if the rings and dress were purchased for her and Alex and then borrowed by Chad and Lori as claimed to Keith? I will try to ask that. I have tried to interview Zulema, and she directed me to her attorney. So, Attorney Garrett, if you're watching, let me know. I do know that Lori then bought a wedding dress. So if they were for Alex, she also bought the dress. So I don't know how that would be. Regardless, as I said earlier, she was wearing the rings. Sue says, I just finished watching Dateline. I'm disappointed. Why didn't Keith show more of the rambling stories he talked about? False advertising. Well, interesting point of view. They probably could have shown that. And all of us would have loved to see it. But again, talking about the journalism, ethically, how do you tell the whole story, get it into 2 hours, really an hour 30 after all the commercials. I thought they did a good job telling the story, especially if you've never known it. I thought it was a great synopsis of all of it with Lori in there. Tammy, I hope this isn't too personal, but Nate, are you wearing pop-on veneers? If so, do you like them? I'm not, but this is a fake tooth. This one. Yeah, this one. 3 or 4 years ago, I was at the gym. I jumped on a box. The box slid out from underneath me. I fell back on the ground on my elbows really, really hard. It knocked the wind out of me. I stood up too quick. I then passed out and fell face first on the hard floor. When they called 911. Fortunately, I came to before the ambulance got there. This tooth, prior tooth, not this one, was like crooked. It had slammed it. And that has been my fear since the day I got my braces off, that something would happen with my smile. I was so crushed. So I went to the dentist. They yanked it back into place, and then they had to keep an eye on it, and the tooth was dead. So they took out the tooth, and this is a crown. So it's not a veneer, it's a crown. This is the real tooth, and hopefully that one didn't die. But now you know more about my teeth than you ever needed to know, just being honest with you, Tammy. I will say that day, I was supposed to go on with Nancy Grace to talk about this case. And so I left the gym. I didn't know, and I drove home. My wife was so angry that I didn't call her. She's like, you just passed out. You could have passed out again. Went in the basement. I was in so much pain, my elbows and my mouth, and I did the Nancy Grace interview. So anything to get you information. Amy, I just finished watching Dateline. I understand what Keith meant by needing a nap. I feel anxious. Yeah, right. I know. He said he wanted to just open up his brain and cool it down. Christine, given your close proximity to Keith, can my friends and I make a suggestion? Please, can they release the entire 90-minute footage unedited? I would pay for that. Their ratings would go through the roof. I don't think they're going to do that, Christine, but I will ask. I really wouldn't count on it, but I'll ask. Glenn asks, if I could ask Lori one question, what would it be? Man, that's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. I've debated with this over and over and over. Well, okay, here you go. Lori, do you believe in the 10 Commandments? Assuming she says yes. Lori, which part of thou shalt not kill do you disagree with? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not, on and on and on. And I just gave away my question for any other reporter that might do it. So yeah, there you go. That would be my question just off the top of my head. But the goal is to get some sort of news. And you want news out of Lori. So would I lead with that question? No, but we'll see. We only got a dozen 10-second clips. We feel cheated. I'm sorry. My sister and I are a huge fan. I live on a Spanish island near Morocco. We can't access Keith's interview with Lori. Help. Okay. For those of you that haven't seen it, if you're in America, you can go on Peacock, and it's on there. I believe Dateline put it on their website. And you can go, I think for anyone, if you have Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I don't know if it's on Spotify. I listen through Apple. You can listen to the podcast, which I think comes out today or tomorrow. So excuse me, you might not be able to see it, but you can listen to the podcast. Those are the only ways. It's not going to be on YouTube. Ferdy, we live near Boise, but used to live in Southeast Idaho. We're big fans. Thank you, Ferdy. What did you think of the Dateline interview? Well, I hopefully I answered that question. I thought they did a good job. I would have loved for more Lori too, but I understand, why they did it. And, they got the interview. That's a huge get. Nate, can you submit 10 questions for Lori to answer? This is from Jeff. Will she? If she doesn't, then you shouldn't be allowed any more airtime. She shouldn't be running the shows, yours or Dateline. Oh, that's a good thing. We normally don't submit questions in writing. But, I'll ask her. I guess I'll ask her. Answer me these questions. In writing, it might be better. I don't know. Katie, is there proof the rings were for Alex and Zulema? We talked about that. Why didn't Lori bring Chad up more? Why isn't she throwing Alex under the bus? Wouldn't that further implicate her? You would think she'd go after Alex and Chad, just nonstop, the two of them, and really push them under the bus, but she's not, as far as we know. She could in this trial. I'll be shocked if she does. Marianne, where Lori's representing herself, will she be shackled? I don't think so. Remind us what her charges in Arizona are. They're conspiracy to commit murder for Alex, for Charles Vallow, and for Brandon Boudreaux. How close can she stand to the witnesses? I believe she will stand at her table. I don't know the layout of the courtroom yet. And for the courtroom we've been going to here in Phoenix, it's going to be a different courthouse, different courtroom from what I understand. We should know more tomorrow. Watch tomorrow night. I'll have a recap from Arizona. Janine, I think Lori implicated herself when she said, "Were you there, Keith?" Oh, that's a good point. Perhaps. Christina, given her formal diagnosis, what meds is she on? I don't think she's taking any. She does not want to be medicated. Does she take them? No. Is she mandated to? No. Can someone interview Chad? I'd love to. If you know him, have him call me. How does Keith prepare himself? A lot. The producers prepare him. Packets of information. They watch old interviews. I know that Shane, the producer, watched my old interviews with Doug Hart, with Ron Ball, with Ray Hermosillo, with Rob Wood. They do a lot of preparation. They prep for this for a week or more, nonstop. What does she do all day in prison? I don't know. I know that she likes getting commissary, the food from there. Laura, how many of Keith's questions did Lori actually answer? 0? No, I don't know. A few, maybe. I think the ones she actually answered, we saw. So you can go back and watch it and count it up. I think that's it. I think that was a lot. You guys had great questions and good observations. Thank you for watching tonight and for watching the Dateline and, sticking with us for the coverage. Here's where you can find me all year long. I'm on the Facebook. I'm on the Instagram, the Twitter, the X, and on YouTube. And my family has a little channel called Meetin' the Eatons. And that's what we have here. In fact, you know what? Should I call Erica and ask her thoughts? I'm going to call her right now, just because I know you're so curious about the interview. She's far more honest than me. She's home in Idaho, probably having dinner. See what she says, and if you can hear it.
Hello?
Hey, Emmy, is Mom there?
Yes.
Can I talk to her real quick?
Yep.
Thank you.
I love her. Emmy's holding the phone for me.
Okay, quick question. I'm doing Courtroom Insider right now, and just wanted to hear your thoughts about the Lori Vallow interview.
Well,
Quickly, you don't have to go in. You don't have to go into elaborate a lot.
is it live? It was what I expected it to be. It was her trying to give her side of a nonsense story. It would have been nice to hear the truth, but I don't think she's capable of that. So instead, we got some cockamamie story that we'd heard her tell her son.
Right.
I don't believe it all, and none of the evidence shows that. So I was very disappointed by the fact. I would have liked to see the whole interview, just how she has tried to twist things around and whatever, but that's my thought.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll call you later. Love
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, I cut her off. Sorry. There you go. And with that, we'll end on my wife. Tomorrow morning, Lori's in court, 8:30 Arizona time, which is 9:30 Mountain time, because we're not on daylight saving here in Arizona right now. So I will start live tweeting when the hearing begins, and then we'll post the video later. And then tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I will have Courtroom Insider with everything that happens, along with some court documents that have been filed in the case that I need to analyze because apparently I'm mentioned in them. Goody. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good night. This is Courtroom Insider. I'm Nate Eaton. See you later.